Like to this day, I'll always remember. I woke up at 7. I checked my email, and an email came in, and it was love this, and I was like, oh, it was such a relief. I was like, I feel so good. I was like, this is nice, and but it was nonstop, and then you get into government, and it's 24/7.
Welcome to the In the Arena podcast. My name is Jared Miguez, a co-host on this podcast that brings you the inspiring stories of our clients who are leaders and innovators across different industries in Southeast Louisiana. They are visionary entrepreneurs, savvy real estate professionals, media creators, military business owners, and community champions. And we are going to showcase the remarkable achievements and share their personal stories. Tune in for insightful conversations, valuable lessons, and motivational stories that are going to reveal their secrets to success and offer you insights to help you on your own path. Welcome to In the Arena podcast.
This is the, I forgot what we called it, the wedge.
The wedge.
Not really the wedge, sorry.
Well, it's the In the Arena podcast.
Yeah, it's a subsidy of the wedge.
Welcome to Media Week.
Media Week, yeah. Today we got Marcus Clark here with us.
Hi.
Hi, how are y'all?
From Texas, from here to Texas, back to here.
Yeah,
Welcome.
10 years in Austin. It was.
Is it still weird? Is Austin still weird? I know they had to keep Austin weird, right? Like
It's
everywhere.
not. Yeah, it's not weird. I don't think it's weird in the way it used to be weird. It used to be like kind of like similar. We always called it like a cleaner New Orleans. It was like a.
Yeah.
It was.
Sure.
Just they had like what they call it Dirty Six, and they're like, "This is the Bourbon Street." I'm like,
It's kind of like your misfits.
This is like your PG Bourbon Street,
Yeah.
but it's just gotten weirder in like the wrong direction. It's just some local changes they made. There's a lot of it was safety issues. Now, ironically, now they can probably take a claim to being a little bit closer to bourbon and all that. But no, it's a great city. We still love being there, but with 2 kids and all our families here,
Is that what brought you back here?
pretty much.
Yeah.
It was, we both work. We don't work at a place you have to show up 9 to 5. It's both remote work, and when you do that, we bought a house that was a little bit further south Austin, and driving kids to school, it could take like up to 2 hours between there and back, and it's just like this is insane. You found yourself spending I left my job because I got tired of doing the 2-hour commute, 2.5-hour commute every day. And then you're basically commuting your kids, and it gets to be a challenge. So not having family definitely hurts a lot, because it's like you just need someone to watch your kid for a minute, and babysitters are through the roof nowadays. I mean, if this doesn't work out for me, I'll go just start watching people's kids.
Seriously.
The going rate's pretty high.
Yeah.
But just that I actually had some health stuff go down that kind of helped encourage us to say, man, if this happened again, maybe, my parents came a bunch, but they're all older now, and just being near people and resources, if the work works out, we're like, right now we can do that, so we'll give it a try. And we're like 6 months in, and
So you're new, kind of back.
We moved back in June. New back.
Cool.
So it's been a transition. It's different, as you probably experienced.
I was gone for 10 years too, and then I came
Oh,
here.
really?
Yeah.
Where'd you go?
I was in California.
Oh, nice.
So,
I lived in California for about 6 months.
Yeah.
Which part?
I was in Northern California for like 5 years, then I was in LA for like 3.
Nice.
I did a little stint in Texas in between there, and then I went to LA. But
I did San Diego for 6 months.
I love San Diego.
Yeah, it's so
San
nice.
Diego is really
San Diego's great.
Yeah.
I don't like LA. I could skip.
Yeah.
San Diego's dope, and then like above like Napa Valley and like Calistoga, great.
Yeah.
LA, I could never go there ever
Pass.
again. Yeah, big pass.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's a great one to fly into on your way somewhere.
Yeah.
Stop and say hey for a quick second and be like, all right.
Yeah.
See ya.
You don't want to fly in there though. LAX.
Oh, really? I
rough.
haven't flown there in a minute.
It's the worst airport on planet Earth.
Jeez.
It's literally so bad.
It's gnarly.
Anyway.
So you born and raised here, Mandeville, or where exactly?
So I born in Mississippi, ironically.
Okay.
Old Pascagoula.
Nice.
But I grew up here. I've been here since I was like 2. So I'm pretty much here.
Yeah.
But we're kind of in that weird. So we're in Madisonville. We grew up in Madisonville, but the weird thing is we're on that city line because we're on near the state park.
Okay.
So
Fairview?
we're on the Mandeville side of the river. Yeah, Fairview State Park.
Yeah, that's where I grew up.
Oh, yeah?
In Pineland Park. by
I grew up
Frankers.
in Del Oaks.
Oh my gosh, we're
Yeah.
neighbors.
For neighbors.
Yeah. What? So Highland Park.
Pineland.
Pineland.
Park.
Oh, yeah,
right
yeah.
across the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are. It's technically not Mandeville or Madisonville.
Yeah,
It's like
It's like its
thing.
own
this
little.
in between.
It's like an unincorporated. There's a name for it. 'Cause-
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's called like somethingville, like
yeah.
Hendersonville or something.
Hootenville.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah.
Hootenville.
Hootenville.
Yeah,
So
they have like a
technically-
whole like historic
Yes.
like a town right behind where my parents' house
Yeah.
is.
Huh.
Yeah. So it's weird because I say Madisonville, but it really was also Mandeville.
Yeah.
It's
If you
such
call
a
the cops, they both come.
yeah.
Wow.
Like
okay.
Madisonville and Mandeville, because it's like they both have to respond because it's not really technically
Right.
either one.
Tax wise, you pay Mandeville taxes.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
I
but
mean, come on.
yeah, right there. So just grew up on the North Shore. We'll just
Yeah.
call it the
Yeah,
North
the
Shore.
North Shore.
Yeah.
Cool. And-
Less Covington though. I
Yeah.
know less about Covington.
Yeah, I lived in Covington for a little bit and then moved to Mandeville, and now since our office is here, I spend more time in Covington than Mandeville.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love Mandeville
Same.
though.
I mean, it
Big
was
Mandeville
nice.
guy. Big Mandeville guy. So so you grew up here, and then going. What kind of got you interested in, like, was it always video, or was it like tech, or like what was that all about?
So I went to college. I bounced around a lot. It's just kind of my nature. I didn't know that at the time, but I've learned that about myself. Went to 2 different high schools. I went to St. Paul's for a bit, then I went to Mandeville High, and I started at college as a chemical engineer.
Oh my god.
I know, big drop off there. Well, and the thing is, I was really good at math, and the chemistry class I was taking in high school, I was like, man, it was all math. So I was like, well, I'm really good at this chemistry thing, and
Wild.
so I went to chemical engineering and was like, man, I'm really bad at chemistry. And so at the time, I mean, I've always loved movies and films, and at the time, I was like, I'm going to go to film school, and that gave my parents a heart attack. They're like, but you're going to get a degree? And I was like, yeah, I'll get a degree in a film degree.
Yeah.
So I did that, and I thought I was going to do movies, especially at that time, it was going to be Hollywood. That we were like Hollywood South, and I was like, I'll do movies. And I went to USM. That's where I graduated from, off the coast. And I love doing it. I mean, at the time, it feels like, and I'm sure everyone experiences this. You go somewhere, you have the resources, and they were still filming on like, not quite. They weren't doing DV tapes, but they were doing like
Those
old
Sony
school
like,
cam
yeah,
cards.
yeah.
Yeah, it was. The minute I left, they all of a sudden got like these packages for C100s and stuff, and I was like, that's nice. I wish I had that when I was there. I bought a T2i at the time.
That was my
Canon
first
T2i.
camera.
Yeah, it's a great camera, and that in the 60D was the next one I went to. But I was like, I don't want to use these cameras, so I used a buddy's hacked GH2
Okay.
for my senior film, which will never be seen, hopefully. It was a production and a half, but it was like a mob movie, and the actors took a little liberty with some of the F-bombs in there, and I was like, at the time, I was just trying to like do this huge production. I was like, yeah, we're going with it. And then at the end, I'm editing. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is bad. Like this is like, I can't even show my mom this. I was like, but you live, you learn. So I loved it. What got me into thinking about film was, I loved watching the post-production. Like you get your DVD and you could watch like the behind the scenes stuff. And I was always interested in like art production, just like the background to it. And obviously you love the movie, but you're also like, I'm fascinated by how they're making the movie. And like Saw, I've probably seen that more times than I should, just the how they made it and the behind the scenes and all the art production that goes into it. And so I, not doing well with chemical engineering, I kind of spent a lot of time in the dorm watching movies, and I was like, ironically, I was in a weather class, and there was this girl sitting next to me, and we were talking, and I was basically like, I kind of want to do, she was like, somehow we got in the conversation of like, I hate chemical engineering and I would love to do something else. I love doing entrepreneurship. And so in high school, random throw aside, I used to sell baked goods.
Nice.
Yeah, more or less, right? If I felt like that, I was like selling it out of my trunk, these like baked goods. Like I was running like a bakery out of my trunk. And then I sold like spirit shirts at Mandeville High one time. And having come from St. Paul's, I like put a little joke at St. Paul's and didn't get in trouble, but certainly took some heat from the principal of Mandeville because he was
Bundy?
Bundy. Yeah, it was inappropriate. I will agree to that, but it was great because I sold it to a ton of people and they all wore it on game day, like at school. And when the teachers realized what it was saying, they were like making the kids change them inside out. And cafeteria ladies bought them and they were wearing them.
Oh my gosh.
And they were like, well, you can't make us change. It was quite a scene. So I always was interested in just entrepreneurship and just doing stuff. And it's part of that, try something, do it, and kind of keep moving. But in the weather class, I was kind of talking a lot about, I don't know what I want to do. And she had mentioned, they have a film school here. I was like, no, they don't. I was in Hattiesburg at the time. I was like, no, they don't. Okay. And she was like, no, on the coast. I was like, oh, so maybe I'll check it out. And then the next class, she was not there. She was like, I'd never seen her. She never showed up ever again the rest of the semester.
An angel.
So so I was like I kind of took that as like a sign. I was like, maybe she just dropped out. Who knows? Maybe who knows what actually happened. But
crazy.
Yeah, it was a weird experience. I was like, well, she's gone. I was like, you know what? I was like, I'm just gonna do it. And so I've been doing it a while now. When I first started, I think like everyone, you think you're really good at it, and you're like, why doesn't anyone want to hire me? I'm so good at this.
Oh man,
and you're like, it's you against the world trying to figure out how do you get jobs and then get people to pay you for the jobs and not the experience.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
Yeah, because I get it now. Everyone's like, well, here's a great opportunity. And you're like, yeah, but I need to like money.
Yeah.
Can you pay me for that? And they're like, well, no. So I dealt with that a bunch, just like everyone does.
And that was here.
Here, yeah. So starting out after college, started my own company, Simple Cinema at the time.
Simple Cinema.
Yeah, I still have that like moniker everywhere, and people are like, what's Simple Cinema? I'm like, Darker Days. But so I gave it a go, and it's tough when you're early 20s trying to figure it out, especially back then. Media was it was the old dogs,
For sure.
You was really extra hard. I did a project in New Orleans one time, and we brought our GH4s, and we think we're cool. We got our Rokinon cine lenses on there, and we show up, and the guy, I don't even remember what camera he had, but it was like
a red something.
No, it was almost like an old school Panasonic kind of. And he's talking, well, what gain are you at? I was like, well, we don't do gain, we just do ISO. I was like, I understand, because I shot on at USM, how kind of older it was. I shot on 16 millimeter film half the time. Oh, wow. They made us cut. We had to edit on Steenbeck editing tables and we had to shoot on 16 millimeter Bolex.
Though.
Super. So I actually, hot take, I actually think most people who are really trying to learn should actually go and do it physically cut your media, because when you pay to have your film processed, then you actually run it through the system and you make those cuts, you don't get it back. You can't tape little frames together. You actually have to like see your frames in the light, and when you cut too many times. It's not like digital media where you're just like, undo. It's like, oh, I've gone too far, which makes you really think about your edits, and you get the little grease pen out and do all that. So it was super benefit. At the time, I was grumpy because I was like, we're in a digital era now. But in hindsight, I'm like, that was the best thing from an editing. I think there's so many people that edit but have no sense of what they're actually editing. They just are putting clips together. And I'll hear tons of people like, I just throw clips together. I'm like, yeah, but do you not have any motivation? It's motivation for your editing. And you don't have to. I get in today's content, there's so much content. It's like, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But that was super beneficial. But I forget where we were headed.
So then you were kind of younger, Simple Cinema, doing all that thing. So then like that transition, what made you want to go to Texas?
Well, two different things. One, my wife and I at the time, she wanted to go to grad school. She wanted to go to UT.
Okay.
And we had heard a lot about Austin, and we went and visited Austin. We're like, yeah, we want to go to Austin. And knowing just it's a little bit more progressive, I could probably get more of a film job, like video job out there. What I discovered, I did some stuff with films, but like what I started to realize is, if I kind of had a moment where I said, if I want a family, and this isn't the hard and fast rule, but if I want to one day have a family, I have a wife, what I noticed in doing some production stuff is most people, if they are married, they're now divorced or twice married, 3 times married. You're working 16-hour days. It's a roller coaster, and you may not really have a family, or you may get there was not a lot of like unison when it comes to like a bunch of family people. And I was like, this just may not. I kind of have to choose that. Maybe I can make this work as a freelancer and get a video job for a company and make it work that way. So I was kind of thinking, hey, it's probably easier for me to get a video job in Austin than it is in Mandeville, Louisiana, especially back then. So when she got into grad school, I had applied to some customer service job out there initially just to see if we could get out there, because she was a teacher, so she had she could go transfer that pretty easily. So it was kind of like, can I get a job out there just to start? And when she got into grad school, we just let that be the reason to get the move going. And then I spent some time there, coming back here, doing some stuff, driving back and forth, and then trying to find work in Texas, which was not as easy. It's one of those things. It's never as easy as it seems, right? Sure. And because you still run into what have you done? Where's the experience? Where's all that? And I applied to a bunch of places. It was a tough time. It was I wouldn't wish it on anybody, because it's weird because you're not motivated to some degree, because you're kind of in this repetitive, you wake up and you don't have a purpose. Even though you have a purpose, you don't have a purpose. Mm-hmm. So that was a tough period. And I got to where I started applying to internships. I was like, maybe I can just I just need anything. Just something to get started. And I applied to it was a gun company, but it was really a smart scope company that they put on guns. And ironically, they put a camera sensor in the scope.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it would like help you take the shot. So like it would calculate all the details out. So you just had to give it the wind, and you lined up this little the crosshair. You pinpoint your target, then you bring the next crosshair, and once it lines up, it knows when to fire, and it fires for you.
What?
Yeah, it's
wild.
This is crazy stuff. And so it was really a tech company in the end, but naturally they sold guns, and I applied as an intern. Yeah, in Texas, exactly. So I applied just to do an internship, and the girl called me. Her name was Kim, and she was like, "You're like overqualified for this. Why are you applying for this?" And I was like, "Because I need some work, and I'm happy to do an internship." And she's like, "Why don't you come interview?" And she called me back and was like, "Look, I feel bad making this an internship. What if we just do like a part-time job?" I was like, "That works for me. Yeah. That's even better."
That's nice.
So I started doing that, and things just kind of trickled from there.
As they do.
Yeah, yeah. I did that for, I guess, I forget how long. I guess maybe a whole year for them, over a year. And when my wife got pregnant, and I was like, "Oh, part-time job's not cut. Part-time job's not going to cut it anymore." So I, did what anyone would do and said, "Hey, I have to leave here because I need to go find a full-time job." Right. Well, they were like, "Well, wait a minute. Maybe we can offer you a full-time job." I'm like, "Well, that'd be great." Yeah. So they did do that. But then they went through a bunch of changes, the CEOs, and it just got they brought in a new CEO in the new year, and it just kind of got uncomfortable. Because I get it. He's running a business, trying to do stuff, but he was a little too old school in the process. And, me and the graphic designer would talk all the time because everything went hand in hand. And it got to a point where they were like, "Hey, we need you to make an ad for a gun." And I'd be like, "Great, where is it?" They're like, "Well, it's not made yet." And I'm like, "Well,
how can I?
What do you want to do?" They're like, "Well, it kind of looks like this one." And I'm like, "All right, here we go." So it got to where you're just kind of piecemealing it together, and that's frustrating. And like anybody, you're like, this isn't enough money. I want to make more money. Yeah. And so I was like, let me see what else is out there. And that's where my whole life took a turn for the crazy, where I applied for a campaign, political campaign. And if you'd have told me when I was in film school that I would ever touch politics, I would have never believed you. And I'd been like, that's crazy. That makes no sense. And I ended up getting that job. I interviewed the day after my son was born.
Oh,
I
wow.
went and interviewed for the job. And then a week later, I got an offer for it. And then a few weeks later, I started. And at the time, I didn't know, before I interviewed, I didn't know who it was for. It was just like Republican campaign. I was like, well, I've got guns. I was like, my portfolio is perfect for this.
Sure.
And sure enough, it attracted them. And it ended up being for the governor of Texas. And
That's crazy.
at the time, everybody was like, that's big. And I'm like,
Okay.
again, I'm not political.
Yeah,
I'm just like,
you're not
okay,
thinking
cool.
about
I had no idea. And I didn't know a thing about him. They asked me in the interview, like, is there anything you know about him? Like, what do you, and I was like, no, to be honest, I have no, at the time, I didn't even know he was in a wheelchair. Like, that's how little I knew about, I was like, I just never paid attention to that.
Right.
And, but I went in and things just snowballed. You could do the campaign work, and then I started working for the state, and I followed him everywhere, doing all of his video. We did his live TV. We did all his video production, and it was not like a crew. It was just you. At the time, there was someone who was still doing stuff for the state. Eventually, he left after the campaign, and then I took over and did everything for him.
So it was like you doing all of that.
All of it. Editing, photos, video.
So you were doing 16-hour days.
Yeah. You were doing 24, because when you get into government, when you start to get, the campaign is just nonstop.
Yeah.
But then, and like my poor wife, she's like,
she's like, we just had a
well,
baby.
it was,
yeah,
look,
right.
we had an infant basically, right? And so he was born at the end of May. On July 10th, I started, and then like the next weekend, the governor had his like re-election campaign announcement that I went down to San Antonio. I filmed it, and they're like, we need a video to put out the next day.
Yep.
So
A quick turnaround.
yeah. So sure enough, I drive to San Antonio. It's probably about an hour and a half away.
Mm-hmm.
I do the whole event. I come back, and then I come home with an infant in the house, and my wife who's like not sleeping, and I just sit there and start editing.
Yeah.
And I think by like 3 a.m, I sent them an edit, and of course I'm like sleeping but not sleeping because I'm so panicked. It's the first thing I'm delivering, and I'm like,
oh yeah,
this has to
There's like
hit.
excitement.
It's gotta be a banger.
And it's intimidating, you film, because film is different. It's still different, but like it's less about art with politics.
100%.
I mean, there's an art to it, but this is like messaging. It gets deep, and it's not like you can just throw stuff together and the people you're delivering it for, they expect a certain look and quality. And so I was super nervous, and as I kind of slept, didn't sleep. And like to this day, I'll always remember, I woke up at 7, I checked my email, and an email came in, and it was love this. And I was like, oh, it was such a relief. I was like, I feel so good. I was like, this is nice. And, but it was nonstop. And then you get into government, and it's 24/7 because your phone's always on. You can't, because we're doing TV, if the governor has to do like a 5 a.m. hit, you're there at 4 making sure everything's, because we built a studio in a room that's probably a little bit bigger than this. And so we did all of his TV out of it, so he could.
At least he had like a home base though. That's nice.
Yeah. We just built it out of the campaign, and it's super helpful, but it's, you're running, at the time we didn't live view, all these like streaming stuff didn't really exist. And so it was all satellite stuff. And so you're calling the networks, and you're in the room with him trying to talk to producers while also trying to be quiet. Cause he's he's maybe to that plant back there, 8 feet, not even. And you're like, we have to go. We have another hit. You're like whispering to the person, but you're trying to be like demanding, because you're like, hey, I have to move. We've got 6 hits, not just you. And we have to get on the schedule, stay on schedule. And so it was very fast. It was fast, stressful, fast pace. And then I was there all through COVID working for him.
Oh, wow.
So that was next level. That's
crazy. Yeah.
Everyone's like, we had to go home. I was like, we didn't go home.
Yeah.
We were doing TV 3 times a day at that point, morning, noon, and night. And doing press conferences. One of the greatest things was out of the big Capitol. I love the Texas State Capitol. Is so pretty. It's so nice. And we had a news crew come up from Houston, and they brought the SAT truck, and so they have to run all these SDI cables. And I was like, I don't know how we're going to do this, because we do it in the reception room that's on like the second floor of the Capitol. So we opened the windows and threw them off the balcony.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
gosh.
this is during COVID, so nobody's out there. Like, nobody cared at that point. I was like, this is what we have to do, because they brought their entire like switcher, their screens, everything up. And so we just took it over and made it happen. But so I learned a ton.
I was
You
about
know,
to say,
quickly
what
too,
a
I'm sure.
learning curve, like
trial by fire.
just thrown in.
Yeah, and it's nice too, because I was able to learn a lot about media, just actual and news media and communications, because I worked with brilliant communications people, and so it's just by the nature of being around them for years, it rubs off. You know, you start to think like them. So it's, while I am a video, I'm a photographer, videographer, editor, I really transition more into like a full-on producer.
Right.
It's like, I can do all these things,
Yeah.
but I can produce anything you want.
Yeah.
Whether it's live or I mean, we had to figure out streaming stuff back in the early with the like black magic boxes when you try to run to Facebook Live in those days, and
There's always a latency too.
oh
It's
gosh,
just
it was so tough. And like we did in 2018, we did like a campaign thing, and it was like trying to produce a live TV show for the primaries. So like they're like, we want to run a 3-hour show, and we'll like put the results. So the graphics people will be making them. And with the digital director, who was he's brilliant. He knows all the numbers, and so he and I went up the night before. I set the whole thing up. He gave me the assist as much as possible. He's like, I don't know anything about cameras, but you're smart. You can figure that out. So we set the whole thing up in a hotel, and I just ran it off of was it Wirecast, I think.
Okay.
And that was nuts, because they were like, you know how to do this? And I was like, sure, we'll figure it out. And it's just straight up live. So it was a lot of trial by fire, and it's weird because you feel like if I make one mistake, I'm cooked.
Yeah.
Like, and some mistakes you certainly would be cooked. Hot mics when you're doing live TV.
Yeah.
If the governor's mic's hot and he says something, because they're satellites, so they're all these news groups are getting the feed, and to think that they won't take that.
Oh man.
And do
Especially
something
with the politician.
Yeah, I was.
So you were like hanging on to the, like, yeah.
And there was we had switchers. I would be constantly checking them. Towards the end, you get a little bit more comfortable at times, especially during his interviews, where like I'd pull up backgammon, play backgammon.
Yeah, you just kind of got it.
Well, because like you start to kind of get a rhythm.
Yeah. Yeah, well, once you're in it for so long, you just get into it.
It's super easy.
The thing that's interesting that I find is like, we've talked to a number of people like in the creative field, and I mean, even you, I feel like I threw you into the fire.
Yes.
Very, very a lot, and but it's hard because I feel like sometimes it's kind of the only way that you can
It's the best way to
kind
learn.
of figure out, and like so many creative people that I've talked to that I think are like, they kind of have that like it factor or just whatever, that really care about their job. They were generally thrown into it.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, I got to figure it out. We're just going to make it work. And like, I'm not going to allow myself to fail. We will figure it out. You know, it's terrifying, but like it works, you know?
It's definitely, it's kind of like they say, like, don't talk about it, be about it.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, that is you have no choice but to do it. And don't get me wrong. Obviously there are people that don't do well and they crumble,
Right.
and but some of it can be a learning. It doesn't mean just because you fail that time, you can't try again. But like, you can study it all day long. You can try to learn it, watch a video, do it. At the end of the day, if you're doing it and you're forced to do it, and in something that matters, and it's like, this has actual meaning, you're gonna be forced by nature just to learn it. And actually, it like implants more, you know, and the pressure will help. When I was in college, because this is probably the classic, I learned nothing at film school. I learned a lot more being on the job.
Yes.
And my senior year, we had this group come in from California. They were from Mississippi originally. This director wanted to do his like lifelong story that he's always wanted to do, and he finally got the money with his brother-in-law, and they were going to make this movie. And they reached out to the school and they're like, we could use some help. Maybe we could get some like internship thing going and you can help out. And we're like, yeah, sure, why not? And we had 2 film professors. I'm like, yeah, that'd probably be good. So like we started with them before the semester started. It was in the summer, towards the end of it, and we were just helping them with reads, like doing auditions.
Yeah.
So we started like that, and then they were like, hey, so we start shooting, whatever. It was, I think we shot all of October. And they were like, we're going to start shooting. This is the first shoot day. If y'all can come give us a hand. We're like, yeah, in between our school, our super important classes we have. And our professors were fine with it. And it was not on paper an internship, which is what was interesting. And when we got there, they had a grip truck van and they had the DP and he had, I think it was an FS7 maybe at the time.
That was
maybe
my baby.
But the lenses were not great. It was like the aperture was not. You couldn't do anything low light. It was way too.
Sure.
You couldn't open up enough. I think it was maybe like a 3.5 or 4 even.
Yeah.
And with the FS7 at the time, you still need to be
like 800.
Or you need more light. Yeah. Right. And they just had good lights, but not enough lights. And we showed up, crew breakfast, and there was no crew.
It was y'all.
They're like, all right, this is what we need y'all to do. And I'm sitting there in my head, we're all kind of like, there is not a single crew person. We are the crew.
I see the grip truck, but where are the grips?
Yeah, they had the AD, the art director, the cinematographer, the director of photography, and then the director, and then makeup and all that. But there was literally not another, and a sound guy.
Yeah.
Of course. You always have sound
guys.
guys.
Of course.
Good old sound guys, right. And that was it. And it was like, okay, so you went from, you're going to help us out here and there to, we did a 30-day production with them.
Wow.
I mean,
for free?
Barely.
Of course.
Because it was, you're young, you don't know anything.
Sure.
However, and don't get me wrong, it was a train wreck. We never read the story. We kind of we're going along with it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you're kind of just seeing what's happening. It was super. You want to talk about trial by fire? I mean, we got into. I'll never forget. We're out in this. We went up to somewhere in North Mississippi. We were the art department too. We started doing all the paint. This thing was I didn't go to school basically for that period. I had to tell my professor, I'll give you all the papers and everything I owe you. I got to give it to you later, and they were fine with it. But you were on a full production, and 30 days. You did that. We did a night, 2 weeks of night, and there was a moment where the DP was like, hey, can y'all arc that light? And we're all kind of like, what is he talking about? Arc the light? We're like, man, I don't know what he's talking about.
It sounds like an old school light type of thing.
He keeps saying that. And eventually the AD was grouchy. She just yelled a lot and was like, arc the light. And we're like, do you even know what that means? Right. And eventually he came over and he was very
fine.
Gracious with everybody. Yeah, I think he understood, I'm working, he wasn't where I feel he was handed a really tough set of cards. Yeah. And arcing the light apparently is just, you're not panning the light, you're taking it and you're moving the whole C-stand and you're arcing the light. I'm like, okay.
Say move the light.
Yeah, just say exactly.
Rotate the light.
Exactly. It was
an old school.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But we were all looking at each other I was like, we probably look dumber than a box of rocks. We're all like,
what do they expect? Pick a bunch of film students who's never been on set before.
Yeah. But by the end, it was such a trial by fire that I learned so much. Just that was part of man, if this is what film production is going to be like, I'm thinking family wise, this is tough. No wonder everybody looks miserable, depressed. They're all talking about their divorces and their fourth spouse, and they never see their kid. I'm like, it was ugly. And then the director sat down one time when we were eating dinner. He's like, boys, I know y'all want to make art, but some days it comes down to you got to make money. And at the time we're like,
we're not making any money.
That's the first thought, right? Yeah. Where's our check? And the producer, which is his brother-in-law, was like, we make money on the distribution. We're going to pay everybody. I was like,
sure.
Whatever.
Okay.
They always say.
Give me the contract first.
Yeah, exactly. But I learned so much in that time period. It was, I wouldn't trade it for the world. Whether I probably learned some bad habits, and we did some things that were super. It was raining, and we had a big 2K light out there, and we're like, we should probably. Those stingers there's a puddle getting here, and eventually one of the guys he was always paranoid. He ran and unplugged and why'd you do that? We're still. And he's like, because it's literally downpouring and you have lights. This is not safe.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was a great experience. I just, the trial by, going back to that, you can't learn it just by sitting in front of a
For
YouTube,
sure.
even YouTube, and they can be helpful. I've learned a ton through
Me too.
YouTube, but
YouTube Academy, baby.
you learn, yeah, exactly. You learn so much just by operating,
Just doing it.
and
Yeah.
finding ways to do it, and then it's just actually repetition, at that point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then so like with the political stuff, what was it, and however you're allowed to say, but what was one time like just a crazy story that you had where, because I imagine there were a lot.
Yeah. Well, I'll say it's interesting because like I've worked for a lot of different, not just the governor, but different politicians, different people. And I think the interesting thing is that it's weird because we all have our own views of politicians in general. And when I first started, I obviously had a thought. I mean, I'm not political really, but I expected them to be different than what they were. A lot of people were fairly they're kind of normal, but it's interesting. The more you're doing it, you're doing these ads and you're doing commercials for people, you're kind of like, yes, movies are fake, right? But you realize you see all these campaign ads and it's like, I'm going to fight for, lower taxes or this or that. And it's literally like, it's like an actor to some degree where you're like, you cut and they're like, all right, where's my sandwich? And it's like,
Yeah, right.
It is a very fast moving world. There's a lot of demand, but there's some people that mean a lot and really care. And then you find some people that you're like, there was a guy I was on a plane with, and I won't mention any names, but like, he's taken some heat, and he's taken a lot of heat. It's not always thought of in the best light. And I was on a plane with him one time, and because of all and maybe it's just because you've heard stories, you hear things, but like, this is a 4-person jet, so it's like
Tiny.
And you could just feel it. You got on the plane, and you're just like, you felt gross. You could like feel the energy, and you're like, this person probably is not the best person. And that was a weird, because like, you almost, dare I say, wanted to like go take a shower, and like, man, I just feel it. You could feel the like aura, and you're just like, this is weird.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good. It's weird because a lot of people, there's so much vitriol with politics,
Right.
but ironically with both groups, and there's a lot of people that the support system. There's a lot of people that really mean well, really have like their heart in it, and are really trying to like make a real difference. But it's a tough place. It's the political game is weird because there's so many things you're navigating. It's not just like a film set, right? Where people can come and go, and there's a lot of people that come in and out, but there's nuance to it because everybody knows a little bit of something, and so you just have to navigate it differently. One of the more interesting experiences when we went to Israel. So we went to Israel and Switzerland.
Oh, cool.
And we were at a house party with the Prime Minister, Netanyahu.
That's wild.
That was nuts.
Wow.
That was surreal because you're like at this house party at night.
Just some dude from
you're
Mississippi.
and I know, right? And you're just overlooking like all of Israel, and you're just like, this is wild. How did I get here? It's like, you start that movie off. You're probably wondering how I got here. That is, right. In a nutshell, it's like, how am I literally standing right next to the Prime Minister? Like, this is weird. And then, presidents, some of the, you meet presidents, vice presidents. We were at a Rangers game, ran into George W. Bush. Wow. And that's it's awesome. Like, in the moment, for the most part, I'm always thinking, oh, I need to get the shot, right? That's really all I care about is I need to get the shot. But it took me a second. I wasn't paying enough attention because I saw this kid and I was like trying to get this thing. Then I look over and it took me a second to register. Yeah. Oh, that's George W. Bush right here in front of me with the governor. And then it's like you quickly snap out and you're like, I need to get the picture. So you get around a lot of people, and it's, for the most part, especially early on, and it's probably, we talked earlier, one of the things that made it so easy for me to do is I I respect, obviously, they have the hardest jobs in the world. Like I'd never want to be governor. That's the toughest job because no matter what you do, you're going to piss somebody
Yeah.
off.
Somebody,
You know?
yeah.
Someone
You
hates
can't
you.
make a decision that everyone's happy with. So you always have to just weigh. It's always, and the governor never slept. Like I thought I never slept. He never sleeps. And I'm like, how do you want to keep doing this? This is nuts. Like
Yeah.
the weight that you can. I'm like, I'm stressed about, is the stream going to go down? Am I doing this right? And he's like worried about
The weight of the
way
state.
bigger things.
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, I'm stressed. So it's interesting because like, I just don't, we got around certain senators would come in and like, I just don't, it's not that I don't care about them. I'm just like, it doesn't matter who you are. Like one of them was like, hey, you want to take a picture? I'm like, not really. Like, it's not,
Who says that?
It's just not,
Yeah.
it's not, but I get it. They're used to people want,
Yeah.
people look at them. They're like almost fans. And,
Yeah.
and I get in the grand scheme of it all. It's like, I've appreciated it more as I've gotten older.
Yeah.
And as the further I get removed from it of like, cause in the moment, my dad's always like, it's a lot of magnitude. I'm like, it's just a
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
But I feel it more and more, and I'm sure in 20 years I'll be like, yeah, that was
was
nuts. That,
insane.
that I
Right.
did that.
Time to like, yeah.
Because you don't
reflect.
appreciate it so much in the moment because you're just like, I'm so busy, I'm so
Yeah.
stressed,
Yeah.
I'm trying to do all this.
There's not time to freak out about it or
Yeah.
or like understand who this person is in front of you. You're just like, I have to do this right now.
Exactly. And like when the prime minister showed up, for example, they didn't want us to bring our cameras in. And because they just weren't sure, you kind of
Yeah.
have to navigate that a bit. And I was like, all I could think about, I couldn't think about so much of him being there and so much of like, man, I have to use my stupid phone for these pictures.
Yeah.
Like, this is boring. I was like, I wish I had my camera.
Right.
It's like, so like,
That's what you're thinking
you're
about.
you're caught up in that, and like I'm like, how do I make this phone photo at night look? And this isn't the new era of cell phones.
Yeah, it's
This
like
is older iPhones
Yeah,
that
right.
So in the moment you're always kind of thinking about the work and the job, but the more you get removed from it, you're like, yeah, I guess that was kind of cool. And
Yeah.
So how long were you in politics? Like, how many years did you do that?
So I'm still in politics. A lot of my work is political. This year especially, I did a ton of political ads and I did some shooting for it, but I did a lot of editing, which is funny because like I don't always like editing. I mean,
Yeah.
I enjoy it, but it's a drag.
I would rather edit what I shoot.
Yeah.
Like editing
Yeah.
other people's stuff. Sometimes I'm like, why didn't you hold this for two more
Two more-
seconds?
yeah,
For God's sake,
Yeah.
So I get that.
Yeah. Well, and then a lot of times it's, I've had to learn a lot of like motion graphics and stuff like that because
Yeah.
a lot of these people don't have footage. They're like, well, I have some photos. And I'm like, oh man, this is brutal. So you're trying to figure out how to make that work.
Scale
but-
zooms and
Yeah. A lot of
stuff.
transitioning and like, let's throw a flare here to kind of hide this. And, but I've been doing it though for, I guess, 9 years.
So when you first started working for the governor and then the state, were you hired like for them, or did you already have Red Owl started? Like,
So I
how
did not. I always kept simple cinema
Okay.
around, and I would always do some side work. Because for a while when I was in Austin, I did the freelance, and there were some companies, like I worked for a company called Rowing Dock doing social media content. This was, I guess, 8 years ago, before content really blew up into like, we were selling them on the monthly, hey, you pay us $1,000 and we'll give you this. And, so I was trying to actually get that going. A buddy that I had met, he was a photographer primarily, but learning videography. And we had started kind of reaching out to businesses. We did some free work, some promos, and like, hey, just to kind of build that out. But that came around the same time. I was still working for Tracking Point, and then so I was doing all the side work. So I've always been like doing the side hustle, which means I'm always, ironically, I tried to get away from 16-hour days, but like I come
Yeah.
home from the job and I'm working till midnight because I'm doing another project.
yeah.
And I did that for a while under Simple Cinema, and when I got onto the campaign, it just became so full time that
Yeah.
like I just couldn't do much side work. So I just kind of put it down and did a project here or there. But when I went to the state, I got pretty comfortable. You also still work at the campaign to some degree. So now you have two jobs, and they're both 24/7. They both have different needs. So I did that for a few years. Eventually after COVID, because COVID was exhausting. The whole comms team pretty much got turned over maybe a 4 to 6 month period after 2020 because it was a lot. It was very taxing. And I went and worked for the state emergency management for a couple of years doing like production management. And that turned into more than what I thought it would be at the time. Always good, it's always, you learn things, but I was managing the website and the web designer and then the graphic designer. And so it just it got bigger, and I ended up with a second kid, and I was still doing side video. At that time, I started picking up side video jobs, and I felt like I was doing more video on the side than I was even for the work, which I came in to do videos, but when you start managing everything, you just run out of time in the day to edit and to work and to film. And so I was like, I could let me try to make a run at this again. But I had changed my name in that period to Red Owl and went with a different approach. And it's been pretty successful so far. I'd say I'm still here and I'm still doing it. And so I can't complain, especially because of a lot of the connections. I still do probably 60 to 80% political work. Okay. And now this year, we'll see what happens this upcoming year. I'll kind of mix it up some more. But the political stuff will keep you busy enough that you only have so much time to do other projects. Yeah. But this year, looking for different projects and kind of maybe some politics. I think Louisiana's got some political. I think they're I think them and Texas were always on different cycles. So maybe I'll kind of dip back and forth.
Oh, yeah, you can do both.
We'll see. I'll always maintain as long as they'll have me the Texas work and just kind of seeing what the market here is different. It's similar in some ways from when I left it, but it's also content's become so much more prevalent, and so the needs are different. And but I hate politics, but I also it's a love-hate thing, and I can do it, and I feel like I do it well, and so it's tough because it pays and it's fed my family, and so it's hard to just, I don't know if I'd ever walk away from it, but it's stressful. Ironically, all this work is super stressful, and working for the state, that was, I put on a ton of weight, like a ton of weight. And,
working for
this. Well, and it wasn't just working for that. I mean, and it was also my own choices.
Sure.
You just.
Hard not to. There's food there in the morning, and
there's food. There's just hours you're not inclined. I know a lot of people took care of their bodies. I did not do that. Right? But the thing is, because I was always still able to move, I was still able to film, and I never really struggled with it. You just don't process
You're not thinking about it,
Yeah, but then when I switched over to this TDM, and when I went over there, because you start to slow down in your thoughts more. And over time, you start to realize, like, man, I better change something. I'm not going to make it. You know?
Man.
So I dropped a ton of weight, like 160 pounds in like a year. Yeah. And
well, congrats.
Thanks.
That's good.
That's awesome.
You don't realize it till you lose it. That like, man, I was carrying a lot. And the cameras they've gotten lighter, but I was always because I did photo and video. I always carried two cameras.
Yeah.
So I was always carrying my rig, and then I always had on a strap. And at the time, it was the 1DX Mark II or III.
Oh yeah.
And with like a 70 to 200 on it. So that thing is heavy enough as it is. I remember I handed it to one of the advanced people, the people who helped set up the events, and I was like, "Hey, can you hold this for me?" And he grabbed it. He's like, "You carry this over?" It's like,
what are you talking about?
Yeah,
you don't even think about it anymore when you're used to carrying it. You're like,
you just get used to
part of your body.
Yeah. What is something that you took that you always kind of think about going forward? Like, what's something that you just grab onto and kind of hold on to? Whether it was learning experience or things that you learned about yourself in the process.
Yeah. That's a good question. I think some of it is something I probably take is one, and I've learned this more recently over time, but your highs are never as high as you think and your lows are never as low as you think. Especially so like stress management, and I'm still not there yet. I'm still learning it.
Same.
But I've gotten better at it. It's finding a way to not let the moment stress you out to a point where it's like, you know, you're almost there. Look, there have been times where I'm like, I'll be frozen in time. I'm like, I can't edit. I don't know what to do. And I feel overwhelmed by just the thought of it. And everybody experiences that. But when you add the kind of stressors of the politics and the people who are asking, and I always have this desire to impress people, not impress, but like deliver. I want them to like it. I want them to be satisfied with it and enjoy it and want to work again with me. And so I take everything to heart. I mean, any project I'm like immediately like drawn into it, but it's managing it's never as bad as you think. I had a project this year that I jumped into. It meant a lot to me, and it was bigger. I took on more than I probably should have at that moment. And it's just because you don't always know when you're doing this work. You never know what other client calls you. You say yes to one client, and the next day someone else calls you. Like, man, this is a good opportunity.
Do both.
You are, right? You'll say, I've said it all this year, every month. I'm like, I'm just gonna say no. It's so hard. It's so hard. But it's finding a way not to ride the highs too high, because what feels good in the moment, you could turn around the next day and you drop back. It is a roller. It'll always. I tried to get away from the roller coaster. It's always going to be a roller coaster.
We're on a ride.
Yeah, and it's finding a way to make it a little bit less super high and super low. And like I've been down in the low where it feels like, you know, last year there were a lot of moments where I was like, man, I think I just need to go like work at Home Depot or go work at like FedEx and do some design work. Like just something so mundane.
Yeah.
But I also know, well, I'll do that for 3 weeks and I'm like,
get me out of here.
Sucks. I don't know. It's like I'll get bored. And so it's finding ways to manage the stress and not letting it kind of overwhelm you to where you just get stagnant. And it's never perfect. I still get moments like that. And in the moment, so I had part of that project, I had a hard drive fail and I hadn't backed it up. And I've never experienced that. I mean, I've experienced failed hard drives.
Was it mechanical?
I have no idea what's wrong. I think it might have been heat coming in from the sun on a window. But I had 2 weeks, like I had put footage on it, and then I came back 2 weeks later, and I was like, oh, it's not reading on my computer, and I went through and eventually I was like, salvage whatever you could.
A month or two ago.
It's brutal, and then I've never had to tell someone I don't have it anymore. It's gone.
Like it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, look, there's plenty still. Like it's not the end of the world. We can salvage most of this, but like, I don't know. I can't explain it. And because I'm always so paranoid about making sure I have it, I've never experienced that. And it shut me down for like 2 weeks because
It's
I was
awful.
like, I was like,
She was at a low for a bit.
It's just because it's like, it like isn't your fault, but it is. Where you're like, I didn't do this, but like, you hired me, and now you don't have your stuff, and like, and then they don't really understand, like, and so you're like, I don't know, but like, it's gone.
Yeah, and like, and they don't understand. What do you mean it's gone? And it's like, and I was like, look, I've tried to. I pulled up the other cards. I was like, I tried everything, but the problem is it can send you into a kind of like a, not imposter syndrome, but I have failed, and maybe this isn't for me. Like, maybe I should just find something different that doesn't, that I can't mess up. And it's very easy to pile it on yourself. And I am a terrible example of, just shake it off and just keep moving forward. However, I do know I've learned you have to keep telling yourself, I got through it.
Yeah.
We ended up with a product, and it's
okay.
I ended up the camera audio. I lost some audio with that, but I went into the Adobe podcast stuff. It's not perfect, but I was like, you know what?
It's gonna work.
Everyone who watches this, except film people,
they will not know.
They're not gonna know. No one's gonna know, right? Like that.
Yeah.
And even she was like, "Oh, Did you find the audio?" I was like, no, but I repaired it as best as possible. Now, when I'm listening to when I listen to it, I'm like, oh, it sounds a little.
Yeah, we'll do that sometimes. They're like, it's terrible, but they're like, it's great. Like we can hear it, but
so it's really about managing the highs and lows, and then the other thing is like, something I took this year, and this is tricky because it depends on where you're at. We kind of talked about this a little bit, is like depending on what you want to do, I've watched so many videos and so many people speak on this, creative people. I'm like, do you do free work? How much free work do you do?
Yeah.
Because if you're trying to hit a market and you're like, me coming back here, like how much do I give my time versus just, hey, this is what it costs. And last year I did a lot of, I'll just do it, not pro bono, but I'll do it discount. I'll cheat, and I finally got to a point where it's like, if you want to make it and you really want to be successful, you're just gonna have to charge people and you have to stand on it. And if you get no work, I mean, sure, maybe you have to assess your costs, maybe it's too high, but if you feel like you're delivering a certain value to people, then you have to be comfortable with people saying, hey, I can't afford that, or that's just out of, being told no, like, sorry. Yeah. And that's always a hard thing when you're like, but I kind of want the job, need the job. And it's kind of, this year I took an approach of it either works or it doesn't. And you just have to, and it's not easy and it's hard because there were times where I was like, maybe I'll just I'm like coming up with a quote and I'm like, I was like, maybe I'll knock it down a little bit. And I was like, no, I'm just going to hold it. I'm just going to hold it. And I kind of said, like, if it doesn't work, then I'll find something different. It's not going to be the end of the world. Just go do another job and find a new career. And, but in my world, especially in the politics, I had to deal with a lot of like heavy subject matter. So when I was there, was around a lot of the mass shootings. Not that we need to go too far into it. But there's a lot of the psyche. It kind of goes back to the stress management, but it's also just the mental health. So in the last few years, I've really been trying to dig into that, and because I've struggled with it, and a lot of times you don't realize it until I realized over a decade in, like, man, I've got some things I need to sort out, and things stack on that you don't even at the time notice, and like you're around a lot of heavy subject matter, and it's tough because you don't notice at the time because you're so focused on the job.
Yeah,
but then
looking at it,
you realize over time it weighs on you. It's like either desensittivity. I one time, we'll see if this may not make the cut, but one time I got on Twitter and I saw like a mass shooting announcement thing, and in my head I'm like, well, how many people are involved? Like, that's where my head goes.
Yeah.
Well, is it really that? And it's like, well, any shooting like that, anyone dying is awful, right? Yeah. But in my head, I'm like, well, it wasn't 20-somethings. It's like, it's like, well, how bad is it? And I'm like, man, I have an issue. I shouldn't feel that way. But you just kind of get desensitized to it. And one of the other things is flying. Oh my gosh, because when you work for the state, you have to get places. You take jets. You do a lot of. They have the state planes, and because you have to sometimes get across state instantly. And I hadn't been in like a normal airport in a minute, and when I went and flew commercial, I was like, what is this? Like, wait a minute.
I'm used to the private.
Where's my complimentary water bottle, popcorn, cookies, and just kind of, TSA, you just kind of sit and wait, and then you roll out and go. So some things you don't realize. I had a lot of perks that you don't realize you had till it's gone. Who knows? One day maybe I'll buy a jet and
just to do it.
Yeah, just do it.
To have it.
Just to have that memory again.
Good necessity to have.
But so I don't know if that's a roundabout way of saying things, but a lot of it's just stress management and the art form itself. It's you can be so hard on yourself, even if a client's like, I love it. The mistakes. The
You'll watch it back after, like, oh, I could have done that. I should have done this, or whatever.
That it's like internal stitches. Yeah. Someone may never know you had something put inside your body, but it's there, and the patchwork. Yeah. But so it can be hard from a creative standpoint, and trying to like get past your own critic before you even get to a customer feedback, and so that's something that is an ongoing battle. And just, I think that's I don't think I've ever heard a creative person be like, I mean, maybe there's a few that are just like, screw it. Well, you either like it or you don't. But I think deep down, everybody has that, like, man, what if it's not good enough kind of thing?
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's part of the nature, but I feel like that's kind of it is one of those things, but I think also sometimes it's kind of that internal like checks and balances of like, do I still care about this? And am I still going to make it good? as opposed to just being like, oh, I'm just gonna do it and it's art and objectively it is good because I say it is. It's like,
Yeah.
but like, do you have that? Do you care enough still to, when you finish something and you're like, oh, I could have done it better. It's like, well, that's yes, but also, at least you still think about that because then the next time you make something, you're probably gonna try a little bit harder or try to zhuzh it up a little different type of way. So, you gotta use it and not let it get to you. And
that's funny. A guy, he was not a video guy, but I'll call him from time to time. We used to work together, and one of my bosses, ironically, but he's always been super helpful in just kind of working through some of the pitfalls and struggles, even though it's like, I don't understand anything about video, right? But he just understands life. And it's funny you say what you said, because one of the things that has always stuck with me with what he said is, I was like, man, this is why is it it feels like it's always a challenge. Why does some people, it seems like it's so easy? And he's like, it's because you care.
Yep.
He's like, it's because we care.
Yeah.
He's like, the reason why it frustrates you is because you care. And if you didn't care, you probably wouldn't be doing what you're doing. You wouldn't be doing it at this level.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be, because anybody can pick it up. I always say anybody can pick up a camera and shoot nowadays. Not everyone can pick up and edit and do it. That's a little bit, maybe we're getting there.
A little bit more unicorny though.
Yeah. But it really is, the more you care, you have to not care. You have to find that balance, because you can't get so caught up that you can't get it done. My wife always will have to repeat to me, Marcus, you're making a video, not the video.
That's
and I'm
funny.
so bad. Because for me, every video is the
video. Yeah.
And
That's funny.
So many times she's like, a video, not that video. I'm like,
You're gonna make many more videos.
Yeah. So that's a big one, is remembering that, like, okay, this will pass. This is just one in a million kind of thing.
Yeah.
And care, but also be, kind of proactive and making sure you don't. Everybody have the little back and forth for like.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, yeah.
This
Which
way,
one?
that way, and it's like no one can tell the difference. Yeah, so that's when but the caring, like you said, it's what also keeps you in it, probably, because the minute you stop really caring long term, it probably gets harder and harder to do it. And be more motivated to deliver the quality product.
For sure. Yeah, man. I'm curious what you think. I like asking people this question a lot. But one thing with that is, like, there's meal work and real work. One goes on your year reel, and then the other one's like, well, we're gonna get steak tonight, and that's feed my family, kind of thing. May not be glamorous, but it pays really well.
Yeah.
And then there's stuff that it's either right on budget, or maybe it's a little bit under, but it's incredible, and you're like, that I want everyone to know that I did that. But the idea of what you're saying too is, like, I'm a big believer in this. Change a little bit, because, like, we're running a business, but, like, it still holds true, is, like, in any creative field, any single one, I don't care, and even maybe some other ones, but, like, good, fast, and cheap, and you can only pick two. And it's such a good way. Like, you want it to be good and fast, I'm gonna have to charge a little extra, because I'm gonna have to say not say no, but say, I'm gonna get to yours in a week.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You're like, however you got to navigate that in a certain way, but if you want it fast and cheap, it's not going to be that good. Like, I'm whipping it together, So what do you think about that?
100%. And it's interesting, because I think there's so many people in this industry now, and they all take different approaches.
Yeah.
It's always two. And then it comes really down to the client, right? What do they, because it's, hey, if you want it cheaper, that's either you are either saying, I can't do it for that. You have to find someone else, where there's always someone there that will do it.
Right.
But then it is then I have to put your project down here in my timeline.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, but I need it here. And it's like, well, then you're paying for that. That is a premium. And it's, I think, especially in the reason why it's so important in the creative space is because, for the most part, I mean, it's still a business, but I think a lot of businesses and a lot of outside of the creative industry, they have a harder time always looking at it as from the value standpoint.
100%.
They're like, well, everybody, you get on your phone, there's content for years at this point. Yeah, you would say days, but it's there's so much of it that people don't always see. They don't understand the value. However, if you talk about real estate or you talk about any, restaurant, there's margins, right? There's time, there's money, there's people, there's overhead, there's equipment cost. It's like, hey, my day rate is XYZ because it's not just for me. It's all the gear that I'm going to provide you. And, I have to pay for those. And if they break, it doesn't come out of your pocket. It comes out of mine.
Right.
So I think people have a harder time sometimes seeing the value. It's kind of like artwork. It's like, what is, well, who's to say that costs $2,000 or that costs $100?
Right.
So you have to pick one. And there are so many subsets. I think that the cheap route hurts the good and the quality route. I think I'm a quality over quantity all day.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of clients don't always they don't always know the difference. You know the difference, and it's time, and you know how much time it takes. But I don't know if people always see that from a client perspective, the value that, because they just look at it as it's almost like a fast food restaurant. You go to a fast food. Well, where's your menu where I just want 1, 2, or 3, and I want it now.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if 20 people order the one. I have to prioritize that. And so therefore the highest bidder, I have to prioritize, someone's going to get it. And politics is a lot like that. You see there's a range of quality. And there are people who want it cheap and you're like, well, if it's cheap, then I have to do it kind of quick and dirty.
Yeah. Polished turd.
Yeah. And it's funny. It's called the portfolio work, right? Well, that's a portfolio piece, and then this one will never see the light of day. And so I very much believe in that. That kind of goes back to with the idea of you set a price point and you say this is what I'm.
Yeah.
You just say no, and it's hard. I have a hard time saying no still, even though I try to practice that. It's like, sorry if you can't do it, I understand. There's nothing wrong with it. Everyone has their budget, but if you can't do it, it's no harm, no foul. And I'm even happy to try and recommend you to someone who might do it at your budget. Like it's not, I'm not going to recommend you to anybody because the industry can be I found, at least growing up in it, it can be very dog eat and they have a lot of gatekeeping and like it's opened up a good bit now, but there's still people who are like, they try to keep it. I'm like, there was plenty of work to go around and the chances of someone coming in and just taking all it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Like I'll have other companies come subcontract and help me out. And if they mention they're a film company, cool. Like, I mean, I prefer them not to, because it looks a certain way, but I'm never worried about that. Cause I think you just stand on your work. If you're confident enough in what you deliver, then, but yeah, that's a very good principle that it goes in a lot of businesses, but that's a big one, especially in the creative space. You can't have all three.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not possible.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's nutty. Well, dude, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all having me.
Where can people find you? How can they reach out and learn more about you?
Well, the best place to reach out is probably my website, to be honest, redowlstudios.com.
Well, thank you so much for coming. It was such a joy and pleasure to speak to you.
I enjoyed it.